Hi, this is Tony Preston with the Asha School of Massage. If you'd like more information about me, you can find it out there at ashamassage.com, where there's quite a bit of information about me on LinkedIn. There are also a number of other YouTube videos out there. Today I'd like to talk about creating a session plan, an efficient way of sequencing your session so that you can take care of more problems, and you can do so in respect to the hierarchy of governors and accessories. Using the Quick-sequence Worksheet, you can plan out a session. In the first column we have the hierarchy of governors already listed on the worksheet. In the middle column we have assessment or routines, and what you put in that column varies a little bit depending on your preferences and personality. And the third column is about treatment notes, things that happened when we treated the person. Let's go through here and look at a problem with the anterior low leg. Let's say that the person came in and complained about pain in the top of their foot. And through assessment, range of motion, palpation, interview, different things like that, we determined that the problem is actually tibialis anterior and extensor digitorum longus. Now here's where a difference in style comes in. Some people may not actually list the anatomical structures. They may go through and list the routines, which would be the anterior low leg routine out of the neuromuscular manual. Once we have determined the symptomatic trigger points, we know this is where we want to go eventually to solve the problem. What we want to do is to take off the governors that are holding those trigger points in place or influencing the body to keep them there. If we look at key trigger points, we would find that the tensor fascia lata refers into that anterior low leg. Part of determining that the anterior low leg was a problem was looking at referral patterns in the book, and we would again look through referral patterns and figure out which of those refer into the anterior low leg. Most directly is the tensor fascia lata, and occasionally the gluteus minimus refers in there as well, but it tends to run down the lateral low leg and behind the ankle. Once I've determined the key trigger points, I move on to the extremity joints, and the joints around that anterior low leg and around tibialis anterior and extensor digitorum longus are the knee, the ankle, and the foot. If you're somebody who lists routines, you might list the posterior knee routine, the ankle decompression routine, or the dorsal foot routine here, as well as the plantar foot routine. But I like listing out the structures in most instances. On the next one, your sheet may be a little different. It may say spine instead of nerve entrapment compression. Nerve entrapment compression is a little more accurate. We would find that that anterior low leg is primarily coming off of the nerve roots of L4 through S1, which means I'm going to go through and do the lumbar lamina groove routine or the SI ligament routine in order to help relieve that nerve pressure. That nerve also runs under piriformis and through the posterior knee, and so piriformis routine needs to be done, as well as the popliteus and plantaris need to be treated in that posterior knee routine. The pectoral girdle is not as connected to this, and certainly not relevant enough for us to go into a bunch of detail here. Next we go to the pelvic girdle. Depending on which instructor you had, you may have learned the leg check protocol or pelvic stabilization. I like the leg check protocol because I like what it does to joints more directly, and that it has a clear assessment section. But there are sections of pelvic stabilization that are essential and very, very useful as well. So either one of those routines. In my own notes here, I would tend to put down that how the hip was rotated. Maybe the left one had gone anterior and the right one posterior, or it was tilted to the right or sheared laterally or something else like that. That leaves us with the upper cervical routines. The upper cervical routines are about getting the atlas properly freed between the occiput and the C2. That for us is the suboccipital routine. and the anterior cervical routines. Suboccipital routine, especially prone, goes through and evaluates those transverse processes of the atlas and is useful for helping to free that area up. The anterior cervical routine is more involved, but more specifically deals with restrictions in the musculature around the atlas. And so you may choose to skip anterior cervical. So at this point I've laid out my hierarchy of governors, and the question is, how do I proceed at this point? And this varies a little bit from person to person, from therapist to therapist, and from client to client. There may be reasons that I don't want to go through and deal with these, all of these governors. Maybe there's a time constraint and I just need to spend a little time focused on the low leg, and so I'm going to just treat those extremity joints around it in the low leg. Maybe the person doesn't want me to work up around their cervicals when they complain of leg problems, and we know that about them. Could be that anterior cervical is just too involved, or not something that you're comfortable with yet, and so you might choose not to do it for that reason. So there are a number of reasons not to treat governors, but the point of this worksheet is that if you will go through and treat these governors and evaluate the symptomatic trigger point, you'll begin to see how much more quickly things release, how much more efficient the session is, and how much longer lasting the results are. So what we would do at this point is to go through and treat those upper cervicals, and then make treatment notes here, not only about what happened with the upper cervicals, but what was happening with the low leg as well. And then go through and treat the pelvic girdle, making note of what's happening both with the pelvic girdle, what results we got there, as well as, again, reevaluating the area of complaint by the client. At this point on this particular session, I would probably do tensa fasciolata now instead of later, because I'm there working at the pelvic girdle, and after the pelvic girdle is released, it's going to take care of the governors on that tensa fasciolata as well. The next piece would be to go through and do nerve entrapment and compression. If you're doing leg check protocol, it addresses lumbars, which is one of the things I like about it, but also we might go through and do that lumbar lamina groove routine anyway, as well as SI ligament to take pressure off of the sacroiliac joint. Then we go on to piriformis, taking care of its entrapment, popliteus and plantaris in the posterior knee, and again, as we do each one of these, go back down and see what happens with that low leg, and you may at a point find that you've released it and you don't even need to continue on with the rest of the governors, that you can go directly and just flush out whatever's left in the trigger points in the symptomatic area. After that, we would go through, and we've already done knee in the nerve entrapment compression area, so we would treat ankle and foot. Again, noting what happens to tibialis anterior with each one of those. We've already treated tensa fasciolata, the key trigger point, up in when we dealt with the pelvic girdle. And then I end up treating the symptom, going through tibialis anterior and extensor digitorum longus. Of course, I'm going to treat extensor hallucis longus with that. And when I look at that anterior low leg, I will see that those trigger points in most cases are already taken care of. One of the governors that I left out here is that nerve entrapment can also happen with the peroneals. And therefore, we would want to include the lateral low leg routine up there in nerve entrapment compression, and we'd want to hit that before we came back down here and did tibialis anterior and extensor digitorum longus. At the end, I would go through and assess this and see if I've really solved the client's problem. If this was a session that I treated earlier, if I had a client come in last week and complained of this, I might create this session sequence for myself before they come in this time, in case I didn't take care of the problem last time, and I can already have this set up without having to take the time to complete this form. I hope that's helpful in creating the quick sequence somatic worksheet.